Hey, have you ever noticed how sometimes people learning English end up sounding super formal or robotic, even if they're speaking correctly? It's like they're reading off a script from a textbook rather than actually having a relaxed chat. I think this is such a common problem that really holds people back from connecting naturally.
Absolutely. I've seen that too. Textbook English often teaches perfect grammar and vocabulary, but it doesn't capture how real people talk every day. When you use textbook phrases, conversations can feel unnatural and stiff. That's why it's so important to pay attention to how native speakers actually use the language in casual situations.
Right. It's one thing to know the rules of grammar, but it's a whole different ballgame to sound like a native speaker. For instance, in real conversations, people often use contractions like I'm instead of I am, or they add filler words like you know or like to sound more natural. Even the way we shorten or merge sounds affects how natural we seem. These little details aren't really emphasized in traditional learning.
Exactly. And those fillers and contractions actually help the flow of conversation. They make speech feel more relaxed and less formal. But learners sometimes avoid using them because they think they might be making mistakes, or because they were taught to speak properly. The truth is, sounding too proper can create a barrier in communication. It makes people sound less approachable and less human.
That's a good point. I've also noticed that textbook English tends to be very clear-cut and precise, which is great for writing, but not always for speaking. When people talk casually, they often use slang, idioms, or incomplete sentences. For example, instead of saying, I do not know, many native speakers say, dunno, or just, no idea, which feels more genuine and natural.
Yeah, idioms and slang are a huge part of natural speech, but they're often missing from English classes. Also, native speakers tend to use a lot of gestures and facial expressions when they talk, which complements the language and makes the interaction feel alive. So even if the words are simple, the overall communication becomes richer and more engaging.
So true. It's like textbook English is this polished written language brought into speaking, rather than a reflection of everyday life. And that affects confidence too, because learners might feel stuck trying to be perfect instead of just being themselves. Sometimes, aiming for perfection actually slows down fluency and natural expression.
Absolutely. I think one of the best ways to sound more natural is to listen to real conversations, movies, TV shows, podcasts, and mimic not just the words, but the tone, rhythm, and intonation. It's about catching the informal patterns and the way sentences are connected casually. This helps learners break out of the rigid textbook mold.
That's a great tip. Another thing is practicing with native speakers or fluent friends in relaxed settings. Instead of trying to use the best vocabulary or grammar, focusing on ease and spontaneity can really help. It's okay if it's not perfect as long as the message gets across. This mindset shift is crucial.
And we shouldn't forget that silence and pauses are part of natural conversation too. In textbooks, there's usually this constant flow of information. But in real life, people pause, repeat themselves, or even correct what they said. Allowing those moments can make speech sound much more authentic and less rehearsed.
That's something most learners don't realize. Pauses and hesitations can actually add meaning or give the speaker time to think without sounding awkward. And it shows that conversation is a dynamic process, not a formal presentation. When people try to avoid any hesitation, they risk sounding unnatural or anxious.
Additionally, many learners stick too closely to translating directly from their first language, which leads to awkward phrasing. For example, sentence structure or expression in English might be quite different. Learning to think in English rather than translating can help people use more natural expressions instinctively.
Definitely. Shifting your thinking is huge. I also think embracing mistakes and informal language is important. Native speakers make mistakes, use slang, interrupt each other. Conversations are messy. If learners believe they have to use textbook English all the time, they miss out on the real feel and fun of talking.
Totally agree. Bringing it all together, avoiding textbook English doesn't mean ignoring grammar or correctness altogether. It means balancing that knowledge with the flexibility to use everyday expressions, fillers, speech rhythm, and informal patterns. That makes conversations feel alive and helps build stronger connections.
So, if you want to sound more natural in English conversations, focus on listening to real people, use everyday expressions, don't be afraid of fillers and pauses, and most importantly, give yourself permission to speak like a real person rather than a textbook robot.
Exactly. Embracing the natural flow and imperfections of speech can make a huge difference. Thanks for tuning into this chat. Hope it inspires you to loosen up and speak English like the living, breathing language it is. Catch you next time.